Apparently, I started a gender war. By the way, I'm going to be reading this comment. This is a legitimate comment before anyone comes with ChatGPT allegation. This is comment section of my video, and there is a comment replying to your video titled "Women are given too much freedom." The video sounds deep, but it's just pseudo philosophy wrapped in insults. First point, you cannot give someone freedom, you can only restrict it. This is a word play, not argument. Oxygen is biological, freedom is social and legal condition. If freedom were like oxygen, then why do we need constitution, court, police and law? Why were women given voting rights and property rights and educational rights through legal changes? Those rights were not natural oxygen, they were legal rights created and enforced by society. So yes, societies can give and take legal freedoms. Your oxygen example is emotional, not logical. The comment is a really big comment. If anyone wants to read the comment as it is, I'm going to be copy pasting it in the description of this video, and if not, then it's definitely going to be in the comment section. Pinned comment by author or creator. So what the comment is basically trying to say, you made a video about women's freedom, but you did not talk about the problems men face. Therefore, your argument about women's freedom is biased. So the first point that I read to all of you is that freedom is not natural. Freedom is given and taken by society. Which society are we talking about? And if we are not infants or newborns and we know anything about society, the societal structure, the very thing that we call society, is made and structured in a way that favors a certain gender, and you know which gender I'm talking about. And if you don't think so, then you haven't seen the society enough. While his opening statement is not disapproved by everything that he says afterwards, let me take my time. So before anyone comes with ChatGPT accusations, what should I do in my video? Should I cover my eyes and make the whole video essay? I understand your incapability to form sentences on your own, but I can do it very well on my own. I don't need an AI to put sentences together for me to talk to a camera, for me to form my own thoughts. I understand you all, but this is not ChatGPT. This is a real human being and some real thoughts. Back to the point, he's arguing against the oxygen analogy rather than properly addressing the underlying philosophical distinction. So what he's arguing is the societal freedom, but this is not all. There are two things: societal freedom or freedom created, and humans' capacity for freedom or principle of autonomy. The first one is ability to make their own choices, the ability to choose, ability to think, form opinions. This is not created by society. And what societal freedom he is talking about, which is, if I'm going to look from camera to here, people are going to accuse me again of reading something. Should I close my eyes? I'm getting distracted. The person was trying to oversimplify a concept which should not be oversimplified. What was the point of the previous video? That you have autonomy in the first place. Men are born with their autonomy as women are. So basically the absolute freedom, what we call it, is absolute to males and females, and there comes the society, there comes the state, the law. The societal freedom that he was addressing is the extent to which society is recognizing and giving you permission to exercise your autonomy. So the point of the previous video was that you have an autonomy, and then there is societal freedom. So you have freedom, and then there is the freedom that society gives you. And to the oxygen argument, if he means that oxygen is not something biological like floating around in the air, then absolutely oxygen is not something that is floating around in the air or in human body. But then again, that's a bizarre standard to impose on an argument. So the societal freedom that he talked about, if government today says that you are not allowed to speak, did they took away your ability to speak in the first place? No, they restricted it. They are willing to go to a length. They are doing extra work. They are putting a restriction onto what you have freedom of, what you are born with, which is your autonomy, which is your ability to speak. They did not take away your ability to speak. They imposed a restriction on it, which was quite literally the point of previous video too. People oftentimes don't have capacity to understand things as they are, but they want things to be narrowed down to the lens of their own understanding to gulp it down. Point was written with a very narrow lens in itself, because women were allowed voting rights afterwards is exactly the statement that proves that society can exercise or recognize your ability to express your autonomy, but they did not created that autonomy in the first place. They did not created the freedom they are recognizing and giving you that. Now they are letting you exercise it, but they did not created the freedom in itself. Point 2 is where the whataboutism becomes a little more clear. By all logic, men are also born free, but men are conscripted and forced to provide, jailed for failing to pay alimony, and treated as disposable in war and dangerous jobs. Where is your video on that? If freedom is natural and no one can restrict it, then why do men face legal compulsion? Why can a man be forced to pay maintenance even if he is poor or unemployed? Because freedom is not oxygen. It is managed by laws, duties, and social contracts for men and women both. You only notice restriction where they apply to women. This is selective freedom. Prime example of whataboutism. What it's trying to say is that men don't have unlimited freedom either, and men are also obligated through the rules of society and government. So do not talk about women's restrictions as if they are the only people whose freedom is restricted. Should I do it? What about men, huh? You talk about women's right, you freaking feminist. What about men's right? What about men? There's one legitimate point there, that men also face gender specific obligations and burdens. This is a legitimate point and we should talk about it. First of all, I want to sincere from the bottom of my heart, I'm sorry that you don't have male figures who talk about male rights, how you have male figures who preach toxic masculinity, who preach men how a traditional household looks like, who preach men that you need to be masculine enough so that 4 women obey you. I'm really sorry that you don't have the men who talk about actual feminist points for men. I'm really sad for you there. But this does not disapprove my argument. Your argument cannot be men have restrictions too, so is equals to your point about women's being restricted is invalid. This is just like saying, if I say women have breast cancer and you say men have prostate cancer. Yeah, women do have breast cancer and men do have prostate cancer. But does that statement cancels out each other? Both are true, but you cannot dismiss one by saying another. Second point is also written emotionally and not logically. Suppose you say women should have their autonomy and they should be able to make their own decisions. And then on the other hand, someone says, but men can be conscripted. Both are true. But do they dismiss each other? No. So where he's saying that I only notice restrictions when they are on women, and that's selective feminism, what did he say? That is what? Selective freedom. But how does that dismiss my argument? How does that dismiss my statement? It doesn't. It is just, why did you talk about women and not men? This is just the argument of that. Why did you make a video about women and not men? If you genuinely want me to address the problems men face, you should just say that. You should just say that, figure out what the men problems are and spread awareness about that. You do not have to be illogically, emotionally writing comments about whataboutism, wrapping them in some sophisticated words so they don't sound like they are whataboutism. Before we move on to the third one, let's face another one which is mostly concerned in men, that even if a man is unemployed, the court is going to make him pay alimony regardless. Maintenance is not simply men is equals to pay women. Court considers circumstances such as income and other relevant factors to decide who's going to pay who. And if you want to criticize the law of maintenance, you have to be more specific with the law. Do not use the exaggerated version of system against women as an evidence that they have no legitimate concerns and restriction on the freedom. Men are treated as disposable in war and dangerous jobs. This is probably the most emotionally written point here. While this is a serious men's issue, why are you using it as a weapon against women's issue? How is that relevant in a women's issue? This is a legitimate subject. It is true. Men are disproportionately represented in the war zones and many other dangerous occupations, but this is not a weapon to use against women's issue. That's a separate issue. I don't disagree that men face gender specific burdens. I disagree with the idea that acknowledging those burdens needs women to stop talking about their own. And against the precaution analogy, what are you trying to say? That women should not be on their guards because most men are not individually violent. Does that mean saying that men are not violent? Men are disproportionately represented in a very higher case of violent crimes against men, against women. Men are disproportionately higher in violent crimes. This is statistical, not an emotional statement, but the reality is you don't need everyone in the group to be dangerous for you to take precautions. When you do know that there is danger out there, you need to take precaution. That's very reasonable. As you are a man, we can acknowledge a simple reality without turning every individual man into a villain. Can we? And the final part, where is your video on that? So you're trying to counter the argument into that women are given too much freedom, and you're trying to counter some of my point with where is your video on that? You're trying to counter my point talking about women's right and women's autonomy with why are you not talking about men's freedom and men's autonomy? Is that what it is? But am I restricted and am I not allowed to talk about one thing if I'm not talking about another? Do I need to address every injustice on earth before I am allowed to talk about a specific one that I want to talk about? It's like saying I talk about women's right, a comment comes up, why are you not talking about men's right? I make a video on men's right, someone else says, why are you not talking about elder abuse? I talk about elder abuse, now there is another person talking about why are you not talking about child abuse? Is this what it is? Is this not whataboutism? You using whataboutism in your comment does not mean that what you are doing is not whataboutism. And the comment saying that you only notice restrictions when they are on women is basically saying that they believe that I am selectively outraged and I only care about the things that happen to women. Okay, prove it. Show me that the claim you are making is actually true and not just an emotional statement coming from someone. Every point is a big one, and if I address everything as it is, the video is going to be very difficult for you to watch. I'm going to simplify this. If women don't want to settle down in means, they would not abuse. This is a convenient issue and not a complete explanation. He is trying to say that not every woman who leaves marriage is abused. Women in freer countries leave marriages more, so maybe the modern freedom is making women leave marriages unnecessarily, and men are also avoiding marriage because they fear legal consequences. Biggest joke of century. In this claim, the correlation is not explanation in itself. What the person is trying to say is that not every divorce is because of abuse, which is correct. But divorce rates went up in freer society. Even if we accept that observation, what does it prove? Absolutely nothing about why the divorce happened. There could be numerous of reasons for a divorce, but correlation is not an explanation. If you say that more freedom, more divorce. More freedom, women become more bored and more hypergamous. That's a gigantic conclusion leap. So women initiating more divorce doesn't prove your conclusion either. Women file divorce more. They become bored, they wanted a richer man. They were just hypergamous, so they filed divorce. Let's say a woman figured out that her man was cheating on her and she files a divorce. So does the statistic that women filed a divorce, she initiated it, magically tells you what the reason could be? So the conclusion that they become hypergamous, bored and blah blah, your conclusion is not proved by the statistic that women initiate more. And the word hypergamy being thrown around like a pillow doesn't prove anything. Many of the divorces are out of boredom or hypergamy or just financial incentives. Okay, where is the proof? Where is the statistic? Oh, divorce rate increased. But that is not a statistic for the particular claim that you are making. So you asking that if freedom is so great and women are born free, why are they freely choosing to leave marriage? Whatever the reason is, leaving a marriage is exercise of freedom. Leaving the marriage in itself is the exercise of the freedom that I pointed out in that video. My statement that some women don't want marriage out of the negative experiences or abuse doesn't require every woman to have the same explanation. And what you used was a straw man argument. So he took three different things and pretended that they took the same one conclusion. Divorce rates, then women's divorce initiation, and then men avoiding marriage. Actually, women with more sexual partners are less likely to have stable marriages. So body count matters and people just don't want to accept because it's an uncomfortable truth. That follows up with a conclusion. Therefore, women who have more than one sexual partner are worse marriage partners, and this is the reason why marriages fail. While I acknowledge the first part, it is true for both genders. If you have a lot of sexual partners, you are not going to be feeling like settling down with one for the rest of your life. Having casual relationships fucks up people's ability to express or feel emotions the same way they do when they are not doing it. This is true, but this is true for the both genders. When you put genders into it and when you character assassinate women on the basis of that, then you are exactly being the worst person to talk about this thing. You're taking a statistically possible outcome and turning it into a moral conclusion. Even if research backs that having multiple sexual partners is the reason for the certain outcomes in a relationship, that does not automatically means this is the reason why a marriage failed. Apply the same reasoning standard to both men and women rather than turning a statistical thing into a moral judgment. Point is basically about my character and tone, that he said you're insulting men by calling them crybabies, saying they complain about women having freedom. Men have legitimate grievances to so calling me is unfair. You can't claim to be advocating equality while using insulting language towards men. I called crybabies. I did not call all men crybabies. First point to be noted. Second thing, yes, you can definitely criticize my language, but if I particularly said that men complaining about women having freedom are crybabies, why are you taking it very personal? Why are you being offended? Are you the one who cry about women having freedom? Are you the one? Don't take it personal if you are not the one doing it. So the argument shifted from, is you talking about women's freedom correct, to do I like the way you expressed it. If you do not like the way I expressed my thought, maybe it was not for you. Using the word crybabies to represent the whole argument, again I'm going to use a very rude word, but it is dumb. Don't pretend that criticizing one word answers the substantive claim. Imagine calling out someone on men are crybabies who cry about women having freedom and then follow up with a line like because they are bored and because of financial incentives. How ironic. Let's take crybabies and put it more into some civilized words. Saying some men react badly when women become independent is not equals to all men are bad. That's your conclusion. That came from you. So why do I even need to answer this? So I hope what you learn from this video is when you call out someone's emotional reaction to something, it should not be with a emotional reaction. You should be logical first to expect logic from other person, and if you are not able to understand everything that the other person said, you are fully allowed to criticize, you are fully allowed to talk your mind, but that does not make you the right one. That does not make your argument a valid one. I picked this comment because I see a lot of comments were follow up comments like this, but this was more detailed and could be made out into a video. So I hope you learn to use logic in a logical argument from now on.